We provide support directly to the customer. There are different tiers of support that we provide. I'm what you call a tier 3 escalation engineer. And basically the bug stops at me. And we do a myriad of things, which I'm going to go into some details about regarding exactly what those services are and that we provide. I do, by chance, sit behind the desk most of my day. I am not a guy that travels or anything like that. But you will get me on the phone, and I will do remote support for you, etc. So has anybody here worked with System Center Operations Manager in the past? By show of hands. All right, so some of you guys are familiar with some concepts, all right? And there's a disclaimer of the presentation. And basically, I work under the umbrella of customer services and support, okay? Primarily under the public sector. So as of January 1st of this year, we're divided into different sectors, you might want to call it. In this case, public sector became its own entity as part of support, and we divided ourselves between public sector and what they call now commercial customers. So a lot of the banks, a lot of the things like big companies, Netflix, Amazon, all belong to the commercial side of things. We, in turn, just handle everything public sector. Some of the big contractors like Boeing, or some of our biggest, Lockheed Martin, or some of those. Most state, local, and federal government. So we get a lot of support contracts from the DoD and things like that. So I have to deal with a lot of things that security-wise are very, very in-depth as far as trying to get resolution to certain things. What I do from a day-to-day basis is more like taking a case and trying to resolve basically its break fix, as you can see. It's all reactive services as far as what I do from a day-to-day perspective. I also provide, in some cases, advisory services as far as how do I do this, what are the best practices, what is it that I can do to better make my systems run better in respects to operations manager. Also, we do provide content. We are required to provide not only internal content, but also external content, depending on what that is going to be helping users out with. It could be something like a KB article that you got to put together in order to resolve something that's a known issue with the product, or any of those kinds of things. Or it could just be training for new hires who are coming in, and you got to train them and you got to show them the ropes, and et cetera. So you got to put in a lot of this kind of content together to get them up to speed, get them trained, and become the support professionals that they're supposed to be. Also, part of my job entails product improvement. A lot of that really involves, telling the software engineers what to do. And I like to make reference to that in quotation marks, because sometimes things work out for the best. Sometimes it's just not feasible for certain things to work. If any of you have done any level of service, sometimes some of the products are not designed as expected, or maybe have certain issues, and that's where we kind of come in. We kind of are that gatekeeper for you to be able to get resolution to some of these things that you've either encountered as a defect in the product, right? We're talking bugs, we're talking bad documentation, things like that, and we fix it, right? That's basically what I do as far as product improvement. And we advise the product team about their either the things that come up as far as product defects and shortcomings of that, right? As mentioned, I also provide in-depth training regarding the product, the architecture of the product, how that product actually works, and as far as training is concerned, we also provide that out to our field engineers to put presentations for proactive work, as well as in-house training and delivery of 100 level, 200 level, all the way up to 400 level type of classes. So we do a lot of that as well. And just plain knowledge transfer. As far as knowledge transfer is, it's just the same thing as advisory. Because we work in a reactive environment, sometimes we don't have the ability to advise as much as we want, right? unless a customer with a premier support contract opens up a case, and we're able to advise in that sense. So in some cases, we're transitioning over from, specifically in the public sector, we're transitioning over from a hybrid type of role that's both reactive and proactive as far as service delivery to our customers in that space. So basically what I wanted to talk to, because this is what I do on a day-to-day basis, is just troubleshooting tools and troubleshooting tricks for our System Center Operations Manager. In this particular case, I'm talking about System Center Operations Manager 2012 R2, which is the latest iteration of the product. In essence, we're going to be talking about a little bit of tracing. So a lot of what I do is, in some cases, a very high level. The way I like to explain what I do sometimes is when you have a problem in the product, or you foresee some sort of problem, or you just don't know where to go for that for answers, there's usually a process of escalation that happens within the company. Once that process of escalation has reached someone who sees that the issue needs to be resolved at a higher level, in this case, Microsoft, right, because we're the ones that are putting the actual product out for that, then they wind up calling us. In some cases, it's a direct line. In some cases, it's not. There's a system of escalation. But in most of those cases, what we wind up having to do is just, most of the work has already been done. A lot of the stuff that happens is a lot of I've already checked this network card. I've already checked this. I've done this. And sometimes you just need to know a little bit deeper into that. For that, we have certain tools like tracing that allow us to look further into what the actual problem may be. And that's what helps us resolve things. We're also going to be talking about Workflow Analyzer, which is also another tracing tool that you can use, right? It's a graphical tool that you can use in order to connect and figure things out from System Center Ops Manager. We also do on-demand discovery. How many of you are educated in how Operations Manager works, right? From just show of hands, right? Essentially, the way this product works, and it's a monitoring tool. So we essentially deploy it on certain servers. We install the application on certain servers that are going to be running a particular set of roles. Management servers, database servers, gateway servers. They're going to have a web console interface as a client, right, as a thin client. And you're going to have a console where you can administrate everything that you need to do with the tool. Now, what the tool does is essentially we install an agent, or what we call the health service, on particular machines. And those machines will gather data and report on that data to the management service and eventually into the database. And essentially what you get out of it is a monitoring solution that allows you to see the health of your network across whatever machines you've installed it. Along with that, there's a concept that we have called management packs. Now, the management packs that we provide out of the box are all there to just start monitoring the very essentials of what these agents are supposed to be collecting, like memory, uptime, some of the CPU, right, network availability, and we should be able to gather that data and report on it and show you a status in the console that allows you to see what your network is actually doing. Now, because of that, sometimes things don't always work out that way. There may be some security things that are in the middle, or maybe it's a networking issue. So sometimes the product just doesn't work as expected. Going back to the concept of management packs, though, the management pack is really an XML document that has a set of instructions that allows you to monitor the specific product that you're concerned for. So let's say you have all your SQL databases and you have 100 of those sitting somewhere in your network, and you want to know exactly what's going on from resource utilization on those machines at the operating system level, as well as in the application itself. Well, we have a management pack for SQL that you would install in SCOM. And once you've installed that, we should be able to deploy those instructions to the agent, and the agent should be able to report back to us what the health of the overall environment looks like for your SQL servers, right? So in case one of your SQL servers goes down because you ran out of database space, right? You just ran out of disk space. We're going to send you an alert that's going to notify you, right? Or a group of people that are part of a distribution list or whatever email thread you have that will let you know exactly why that server went down, right? The last thing you want is having a database sitting out there that just simply goes down with no rhyme or reason. And that's what we're there to monitor, making sure that your environment is healthy, right? So to do that, we install management pack, we deploy the agent, we report back on it, create an alert and send you a notification. That always doesn't work, so we have tools like this to be able to get into, figuring out exactly what went wrong, right? So when something goes wrong is when I get called and they ask me what went wrong and I'm supposed to help, right? So part of that is also SQL Profiler, right? Some of the tools that I use as far as SQL Profiler is whenever we also provide you with reports. Those reports will run and give you, for example, we have an availability report that allows you to see the up and down time of your servers as you see them on your network. If your servers have been running for a period of time, right, and you want the theoretical 99% uptime availability in your network for all your servers, right, because that's what you paid for them in the first place, right, you will get a report. And that report can tell you what that uptime looks like. But what happens when you run your report and you get nothing back? All right? So that's where SQL Profiler tool is something that's going to allow us to figure out exactly why. And there's many of things that we can discuss about that. The other tool is going to be using one of our commandlets. We also have a PowerShell integration into what is in SCOM. And we have commandlets that you can use to actually troubleshoot, to be able to see what your environment looks like for those purposes. And one of those is the export SCOM effective monitoring configuration. Now, in that case, when you deploy an agent, sometimes you have more than one management pack. Now, a management pack is, like I said, is a set of instructions that's going to go out there and figure out something based on what we call a discovery. And I can go over that in a little bit as well. But essentially, you want to know what this thing is supposed to be doing. You want to know what your agent is supposed to be actually monitoring, right? You can't just have everything just monitored for the sake of it. That's just going to cause too much noise in the environment, and now you're faced with a different problem. So in order to administer that, you run a commandlet from PowerShell such as this, that tells you exactly what you're monitoring. It's very useful to understand what the health of your environment is, but also the health of SCOM overall. If SCOM's not healthy, then you can't monitor your own environment. So it's very useful. And I'm going to go a little bit about, in particular, Event 31552 in the data warehouse. Now, sounds like it's a little bit detailed, but one of the biggest things that we get case calls for are when things break. One of the most common things that breaks in this respect is the data warehouse. The data warehouse is one of two databases that exist in SCOM that provide those services for monitoring across the board. And the data warehouse is basically your long-term repository for data, which is where you pull your reports and where you really start seeing the power of the tool come into play. So when that doesn't work, then we start trying to figure out exactly why it's not working. And one of those more of the common things is that particular event. And that event kind of goes into we can go over in some details to what it is. Now, part of my presentation, because like I said, I usually work behind the desk, I'm going to be cutting between the presentation and my lab, which I'm connected to right now. So you more or less can see the tool and not only look at the tool, but at the same time, kind of go through some of the troubleshooting that I do on a regular basis. Okay? And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm open to that, and if not, we can leave it to the end of the session. So as far as the tracing tool goes, this is the location of the actual path where the actual tracing tool is. Some of the commands are very simple. just stop tracing, start tracing, and format tracing. Now, the reason that takes a while is because we do what we call an ETL trace. And we need to be able to translate that information into a human-readable content. So it takes quite a little bit sometimes, depending on the kind of information and how long the information has been collected. Okay, a good typical scenario sometimes where we would use this is when there is a failure of a discovery to discover something. Now, as you recall, management packs are basically a set of instructions in XML that tell the computers what to do and what to look for. In the case of, let's take the case of the SQL management pack. So you install the management pack through the use of the console. Now, as far as, now you're wondering exactly how do you discover everything in the environment. Well, the SQL management pack has instructions called discoveries. And what these discoveries are designed to do, they're designed to go out there and run on the agent, and then once the instructions are on the agent, it's designed to determine whether an instance of SQL lives on that same machine. So we have something called the waterfall effect that, or a cascade effect that we use as far as the concept of discoveries. One of the things that we do for that is we target a very broad set of computers, right? And in a concept that we call classes. And those computers and those classes, when we actually run the discovery, we're looking for things like registry entries, we're looking for things like services, and in some more complex things, we run scripts, both Visual Basic scripts or JavaScripts to actually determine the information that's contained within. So I'm going to go ahead and show you one of those things in here in a second. So right now I'm actually logged into my lab machine at work. And I've already installed some of these roles. And this is basically what the actual console looks like. So you have a monitoring tab, you have an authoring tab, and you have an administration tab. Unfortunately, I don't have the reporting tab installed because I was working on an issue that I had to actually do a reproduction for, so I wasn't able kind of had to make that go away for a second. But I'm going to walk you through some of the administration here in the console, as long as this connection is pretty good. Okay. And as you can see, we have different things here. We have device management, which is subcategorized into agent managed, agentless managed, management servers, pending management, Unix computers. We also do cross-platform. So not only do we monitor Windows machines, we also monitor Unix and Linux machines, and we also monitor network devices as well. And as you can see here, I have 2 management servers. And those management servers are pretty much these 2 right here. I created a domain that I have. They're currently healthy. It gives me a version information. It just gives me some useful information about what that looks like. I also have some agent machines. Because I have such a small lab, I basically installed the agent on just a couple of machines that I already have as part of the lab setup, which are my DC and my SQL Server. And they also provide me with some information as well. As you can obviously tell, they're currently healthy. And this is good. This is where you want to, this is the whole point of monitoring. This is where you want most of your machines to be. Now, as part of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here into management packs. And I'm going to show you some of the management packs that are currently installed. Most of these are by default. I haven't really played around with this part of the lab yet. But essentially, most of these are already here as part of the default installation. So notice that we have certain names about these for the management packs, and whether they're sealed, whether they have a version, whether the date they were imported, and a description of exactly what those management packs actually do. Now, this is basically the core of what SCOM does as far as monitoring. This is where we get all the instructions and everything else. So I'm going to scroll here and actually all right, so here they are. And I'm going to look for, because I don't think I actually have it installed. Okay. So I don't have the SQL Management Pack installed, which is something that Windows provides. So we support every single technology that Microsoft puts out, for the most part, will have a management pack that we support. Exchange, SQL, BizTalk, some even client machines like Surface. Anything and everything that Microsoft puts out as a product will have a management pack for it. And also some other things like SUSE Linux. We also support that. Red Hat Linux, we support that. So just a couple of flavors of Linux and Unix do we support as well. And there's management packs for that. So I'm going to come here to the import management pack. And hopefully this thing will allow me to get out and actually download it. Now, there's two ways that you want to be able to download this. You can simply go download management packs or import the management pack, right? And you know what? I think I'm going to have to go and download it. And what it does is it goes directly to the catalog web service to download those, and you'll get a list of all those management packs that are in there. Only Korean? Yeah, I'm not seeing another Korean version. So which one? Probably just iOS, yeah. Well, who knows what they did with the catalog. All right, so here's the IIS management pack, and as you can see, we have several of those. That's what I did. All right, so notice that in here that we have a status. It also depends on the operating system management pack and the operating system library. So one of the things that we used to have to do back in previous versions of that, you used to have to go out there and manually do this step. Now it automatically detects it and adds it as part of the catalog in here, and it'll download all the prerequisites as far as that. And then you go ahead and just install it. Now, what you see here on the screen is something it's currently being imported. In the background, what's really happening is that there's a lot of stored procedures in SQL that are being executed in order to populate all the tables in the SQL database so that the product works. In some cases, that doesn't actually happen as expected for one reason or the other. The connection is severed for some reason, or maybe there are some prerequisites that are not there. Maybe they're on the wrong version of the product. So my job is to figure out exactly what went wrong, right? And in some cases, you have to go and more or less know the ins and outs of the product in order to figure that out. In this particular case, let's hope that everything works out fine. If not, I might have something good for you guys. So while that's waiting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of get back on track here and show you what the tracing tool does. So when some things like that happen, and there's no rhyme or reason explanation, you search through every single KB article or some sort of blog post, or in some cases you have to resort to some deeper tools that might give you some insight as to what's going on. One of those tools is the tracing tool, or ETL traces. Kind of going back into the actual slide, we're going to go to this directory, and we're going to find our tools for ETL tracing. Put in the wrong one. No. There we go. There you go. They changed the names on all these, by the way. So I'm used to some of the stuff from like 2012 SP1. Make sure I'm on the right one. Hold on. Is it that? Yeah, server. Okay, so in this directory, we have all these little nifty little tools, and I'm going to make it nice and simple. I'm actually going to go to that. So same directory, and notice that we have different types of files in here. And I'm used to running it from the command line and just doing start tracing, stop tracing, and all of this. But there's also this, which is the graphical interface of this tool. Now, in most cases, the reason I do it from the command prompt is because I like to capture everything that I want to capture, regardless of where the error is or anything like it. It just tells me a better story. Now, from here, If you really know what you're doing, which in most cases I don't even know, it's a matter of just being able to determine where the error message is. You might skip a few things, which is why I prefer to just capture everything, right? Now, you could go in here and pick and choose exactly what you want, right, depending on the specific part of the product that you're having an issue with. So if you have the UI, if it's maybe one of the services or the data access service, we call it the SDK service, then you have the ability to just put in a trace area. Now, the benefit of that is of course, that you are able to filter all the data that you want and not the ones that you don't. In some cases, it's a matter of just capturing everything because the problem that you're seeing is not something that you know exactly. There's too many pieces involved, right? You might see the issue on the console itself, so, but the error message may be coming from another component like the data warehouse, etc. So, but you have the ability to pick and choose. I like this just because it's a more graphical interface to kind of display to you. So it's useful in that respect. So as an example, I'm just going to pick a few health services, target to that trace area. And you can change the information level here as well to debug. Notice the output location of the file, Windows logs, Ops Manager trace. And over the course of the years, we've obviously changed that plenty of times for no apparent reason. But we have, and it's just been interesting to find out where the new stuff is as you got to retrain yourself sometimes. So this is still importing. All right, so by default, these traces are always running. They're always running as informational. So they're useful in some cases as informational, but if you need to get more of the story, you're going to have to turn on debug tracing like I was doing before. So essentially what these do is we're going to have to actually stop those, right? So we can start them and stop them. And what it's going to do is going to generate a bunch of new logs like this, and it's just going to replace them. It's going to get the newest one, column tracing, and then the older ones are going to get reverted to the previous, and it's going to append that to the front. So let's say we're going to start that. Now, they are circular. You can change the size of them if you want, but they are circular, and they will generate as far as, you're basically going to have to stop them at some point when you see the error message come up, right? So if you go to your event logs or you're going into your console and you're generating an error message, at that point in time, or right before that's when you start tracing, and then you go ahead and generate that error message, and then you stop it, right? And that should capture you some information. Now in this case, since I've already stopped it, let me go up here again. you would issue a format tracing command so that you could get the information and convert that to something that you can read. Now, for all intents and purposes, I don't want to actually do all this because this is quite a bit of information, and it'll sit there forever and not do anything. So that's not a big of a trace. So I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to actually issue that command, format tracing. And it should pick up on this file here and format it for me. All right, so it's almost done. So the end result will be these tracing GUID scripts.log files. And there's any number of tools that can open up those files. The most common one being Notepad, right? I prefer to use Notepad++ or SMS Trace or Trace 32. They're just different log file editors that you can open up the file itself and just look at what's actually inside the file that will tell you some useful information, right? And as you can see, it's still formatting only with 144K of data, so very, very noisy. You don't want to leave those running too long.
Does it automatically compress the files, like the log files?
Well, when it's ETL tracing, the compression's already there. When you're formatting it, it kind of decompresses them and it exposes more of what you're actually capturing. So if you were to open up that ETL trace in some editor or something, all you're going to see is chicken scratch, you know. So what this does is just kind of converts that and it allows you to read it, but it decompresses it that way. So the end result, oh no. Oh, yeah, right? We'll see if I can connect it again. But if not, we're just going to continue with the presentation. So, workflow analyzer. Essentially, one of the things that we do in Operations Manager is, as part of the XML file that's a management pack, we do things based on modules and a set of instructions, but they're all compartmented into different sections. And in some of those, essentially what we do is we call something called a workflow, right? So a workflow will do something like collect certain, if you want to discover something, let's take a discovery type workflow. We want to find out what SQL or IIS in this case, how do we discover that? How do we know that that particular product or technology exists on that machine, right? Obviously, you need to have an agent installed on the machine, but once the agent's there without a set of instructions to execute, it doesn't know what to do with anything. So we go through a process of workflows, right, that eventually get that information. So the end result, what we want is to determine if IIS or SQL exists on that machine. To do that, we have several ways of doing that. We have something called the probe action. The probe action is part of a workflow, is one of the components of a workflow that would go out there and do some sort of query, either through the registry or through Windows Management Instrumentation, or WMI, or using a script that has a little bit more logic into it so that it knows what to look for. Some of these top-level discoveries are mostly just registries. When you install the product, one of the things that we're looking for is just product name, product version, product path, those kinds of things that are all inside the registry. So the targeted workflow is actually supposed to go out there and discover this by simply querying and connecting to the machine remotely through the use of through the agent and running a workflow. So in some cases, what we get is I installed an agent on this machine, and I'm not able to discover my SQL server. I see all the other SQL servers are already discovered because they show up in my console. But there is one machine that is very important that I cannot see where it went, and I just cannot see it in the console. I see it as you might see it as a different thing as a Windows computer, right? Because it's on the network and it's being monitored as a machine that's on the network, but not specifically as a SQL machine or as an IIS box, right? So that machine is specifically there for that purpose. It's some sort of web server, or it's, like I said, a database server. So this is a tool that you can use to determine why that is not working correctly. Now, there's a number of things that can happen, such as the workflows are simply not running, or maybe there's an override that's targeted at that specific type of machines that is not allowing the discovery to happen. So here comes Workflow Analyzer. It allows us to run this tool, and it tells us what's running on the machine. And it's graphical. It's a graphical way of representation of being able to see this. And I'm probably not going to be able to show you that without my lab. So I'll give it another try if not. Essentially, here's a small sample of what I took out. So one of the things that we use for troubleshooting is we go to the event logs to tell us, what's maybe going on, what may be wrong with a particular discovery. And what we'll do is, once I get my connection established again, hopefully I'm able to show you that. But this is what the tool looks like, and we'll reconvene at after the break time. I think it's almost break time, I think, right? Yeah. All right. So we'll reconvene at that later time, and might not get through the whole slideshow, but if anything, at least it will show you whatever I can. So for now, we'll turn it over to, I think, Dave, right? Great tool that I can look at this and look at any error messages, because it automatically will highlight errors and warnings to tell you, a story. And based on this, I can see that I'm having some issue with the health service where it failed to, file not found, etc. In most of these cases, there may be a legitimate issue or not, and it depends on what exactly you're looking for, whether it's even related or not. But I just wanted to show you so you could understand exactly what we have to go through as far as, how deep we got to go into some of this stuff at times, just to kind of find out the information that you're looking for. So we did get some relevant data there, and as you can see, some of, apparently I'm having an issue where health service is failing to open up a file. And registry entry, yeah. So if I was to use like another tool like Process Monitor from Sysinternals or something like that and combine this information together, I could probably get more information as well, or just correlate it and then provide an action plan and something that will lead us to a resolution. But I just wanted to show you this for the time being. So I was getting to the Workflow Analyzer. Now, in the Workflow Analyzer, it pretty much looks like this, and like I said, it allows you to essentially trace or look at running workflows in real time, which is pretty nice and to look for and to be able to use. So I'm going to switch over here. And, oh, yeah, this is the other thing I wanted to show you. Apparently, after I imported my management pack, I started getting some alerts. Now, I don't have any subscriptions yet, which means I can't send out an email notification. But if I had configured an Exchange server or some email server, this will automatically generate an email by configuring that information. It can go to any group of users. I mean, this is the ultimate goal of what Operations Manager is supposed to allow you to do. There's a problem somewhere in your network that you're currently unaware of. We will pick it up, generate an alert based on the criteria, and then inform you of that. And you will take some action based on that, or whoever your IT administrator is. If that is your role, then you would take some action based on that. And we try to provide you as much information as possible so that you can properly resolve the issue. Okay. Now, in this case, I only have a PowerShell script that's failing on one of my other management servers. And it gives me it tells me exactly which one it is, right? The actual script that's running. And obviously that must be coming from the one of the management packs that I just imported, or maybe it was there before and I didn't notice it. But it's timing out, which means it's trying to run, and after 5 minutes, it just didn't continue to run. So if this is something that it's a type of script, like in this case, agent state rollup, apparently there's some functionality to allow you to see what that rollup looks like, right? And I'll show you what this can do. You can go and open. You can look at the diagram view, state view. And I'm going to go with the Health Explorer. Resolved itself. Oh, is it a rule? Didn't even bother. Yeah, it's a rule. Okay. So that's probably why it doesn't show up. Let me see this one. Yeah, so this is a monitor. So here's a good example of the differences between a few of the things that we do in Operations Manager. One, in this case, will generate an alert, but it's as you can see, it's called an alert rule. And when I looked this up, it didn't have any state change in here. So notice that it says it had a warning, but all these are green, and that's because it's coming from an alert. And all the alert it does is basically goes out there and it checks for a particular condition and it lets you know if it met it. Now the difference between that and a monitor, and like in this case, is that it will continue to check for that condition, and once the condition changes, it will revert its state back to a healthy state. So it checks to see if it's currently in a bad state and alert that and change that in the console so that you know that there is a problem. And once that problem has gone away or been resolved, it will switch back to healthy. So this is kind of what that looks like. This is the actual monitor that's detecting that condition, where if it actually meets that condition, it checks it, and it'll always leave it at healthy. If it meets a condition that it deems that's an error, or it will change that condition to critical. And the logic is also is built into the actual monitor. And you can tell it exactly what to do, and in some cases you can even assign a diagnostic or recovery. So in case of a service that goes down on one of your machines, you can just simply tell it to go and restart, and you would be able to do that. Yeah, well, it doesn't show that. So more or less, this is kind of what the event, this is actually an event-based type of monitor. So it's looking at a particular, in this case, I believe, since it's coming from ourselves in the data warehouse, it's looking at this particular event in the operations manager event log. So all it's really doing is just looking and parsing through the event log, and it's looking for that specific event ID. And it will generate that based on that condition. And it checks it every 5 minutes, etc. Now what I wanted to show you was this one. It looks a little bit different because it has what they call a health rollup. Remember the cascade effect that I was talking about? It more or less representative of that here, where you can see that there are certain things where if the condition at the bottom of, or the most, was what we call a unit monitor, if that condition is detected by this specific monitor, it will change that and roll it up to the top so that it generates that information all the way up to here, right? So notice that not everything else is here is critical. It's just these two that roll up to this guy, that roll up to this guy, and all the way to the top. So whatever view you're looking at, depending on exactly what type of object you're looking for, whether it's a Windows computer or a SQL server, it will roll that up. The worst state, it will roll it up and let you know about it. In the end, it generates an alert. So I'm back here in the same program files directory. Actually, I'm one level up from the tools, and I actually have a copy of the workflow analyzer. Now, in essence, Workflow Analyzer should allow me to see everything that's running on any one machine in particular that I pick. Now, you do have to do this from a management server. The management server, in this case, it's the first one that I installed when I first installed the product. And there's a particular role in here called RMS, or Root Management Server. Now, that concept has gone away since 2007, and in 2012 it no longer exists. We do in some cases require it for backward compatibility with some of the older stuff. So there's a role in there now that we call the RMS emulator. And it's just a set of workflows that act like the root management server from back in 2007 that allow us to continue to support some of the older versions and things like that. So in this case, I want to attach to let's say an agent machine, right? SQL Server. And I have to specify those two things in here, and then I start my actual trace. And what I expect to see is something that looks like this. Now, when you see something that says failed, right, that's a good indicator, going back to this slide, where in my event logs I have something that there's a rule that's unloading. Now I might not see it because I don't think I have something like that in my current lab environment. But if you did, this is a tool that is useful to be able to resolve this. If you are set on monitoring something and it's not doing its job because of some reason, and it's unloading the monitor that it's supposed to be doing that job, then this is how you would use this tool to go about fixing it. And it clearly gives you some information whether it's running or if it's failing, etc. Right? And there's it at least tells you what that particular monitor is. And here, in this event, as you can see, some of the verbatim is not that good. It only tells you that something unloaded, which is not very useful to be able to resolve it. So By using the tool, it allows you to more pointedly concentrate on the actual things that are showing up as failed. And then that allows you to narrow down the issue to which particular monitor or rule is having the problem. So, and here's a filter that you can use. And you can filter the columns by display name, category, status. The most useful one usually is status, just to see what's going on. And you can filter it like that. Or you can enter some sort of just a verbatim in here that says if you happen to think that this is the issue is happening on an IIS machine or a SQL machine, then you can just type in SQL, and then that should narrow down your search. That's interesting.
Is that kind of like a event manager where you can sort
There we go.
by category and date and stuff like that for errors only and
Yes.
types and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. So these are the rules that are running. You really don't want to see any anything in red per se. Also, this also allows you to see. This is very useful for a technician also when someone comes and says, well, I need to know what's going on with this environment. I need to know exactly what's being monitored. Do we even need it? In some cases, it's just for fine tuning. Maybe there's business requirements behind it that don't exactly that are necessary to be able to just monitor certain things and not others. So this gives us a status of it. As you can see, there's some that are just not running. It's configured to run them, but they're not currently running. So these are sometimes like what we call a heartbeat alert to see if the agent's responsive. We run that every 60 seconds just to see if we can get to the machine, right? That's how we check for availability. Very important to know if your actual server is up, right? So we do that every 60 seconds, and it'll tell us in here whether it's running or not. If it's not currently running on something more of along the lines of a discovery, right, you don't want to put that much traffic on the network. This allows you to view that and take some action against it. You don't want to flood your network with unnecessary information, right, because it can be pretty chatty if you want it to be. And it allows you to fine-tune it so that it becomes a more effective machine. Now, this is just something that I'm not really going to go through, but it's important to know that you can also do this. Essentially, the tool works in such a way that it actually creates a management pack on the fly, and it downloads that management pack directly into the agent. And it's a special function that allows you to trace it. In this case, if the tool, for whatever reason, is not working accordingly, then you can actually revert back to a more manual method of using and configuring an actual management pack. And I have the instructions, and you can essentially create an override and add a couple of things. In this case, it's this particular property within the XML code, and changing it from enabled to trace enabled. And that's all it really needs to do, and all it really needs to do in order to bypass if the tool is not working correctly. Just because it is a pretty heavy tool to use. If you have too many things running, and sometimes it won't catch up, it acts very slow. So it's good to know that you can actually still troubleshoot it if you need to via a different mean. And this just kind of goes more into details about what those steps are. Essentially, you find the workflow in the authoring workspace. You create the override to enable. You change that, and it becomes trace enabled, so that you set that particular feature to trace, and you save it to a new management pack. Export it. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You first save it, you export the management pack, and then you edit it. Once you've edited it, you re-import it back. And then that way tracing is enabled, and you can bypass that. In case of very large environments, in some cases I've run into and you've had to do this. It's one of those things where you kind of have to just improvise and figure things out when things don't work properly. So we also touch on on-demand discovery. In Operations Manager, there used to be, for the most part, it's an automatic process that you're not supposed to see, per se, unless something obviously goes wrong. Now, in on-demand discovery, you can force a discovery to run outside of its scheduled time to figure that out. And in order to do that, you can essentially use PowerShell. And it's a little tricky, as noted here, because it is not too intuitive, and you do have to look at the name of the discovery as it stands in the database. And the way it shows up in the database is a bit more of it's a GUID. It's a coded value in the database. It's not a display name, something that's very user-friendly. So it can be done, and this used to be a big ask in 2007. In 2012, we've enabled this feature so that you can do on-demand discoveries, but it can be a little tricky. Now, with SQL Profiler is another tool that we constantly use. And the reason why we use it so much is because everything that we do in Operations Manager at a more intimate level is all based on stored procedures. Those are all already pre-configured in the database to run as effective as possible. And as noted here, most of what we do is, everything that we do is basically maintenance, grooming, resource pool management, spinning up of workflows, data insertion. Just the inner workings of the actual product is done through stored procedures and through the database. So one of the challenges that we have is in keeping it small whenever we're troubleshooting. Just because SQL Profiler is a very noisy tool, it collects a lot of information and it's very useful, but you need to be able to narrow things down to something that filters out the noise. Otherwise, it's just way too much data. Most of the time, you don't have enough of it. It's not intuitive. It really is all over the place. So in order to do that, you'd have to get SQL Profiler to configure it in such a way that you're only getting the right information that you need. So in order to do that, in the tool, you can actually go in and set those filters. And since we do nothing but store procedures, it's easy to configure that to just RPC completed, all events that use errors and warnings under user error message, RPC starting, as well as SP completed and SP starting. Those are all just filters that are in the tool that allow you to narrow that and cancel out a lot of the noise that's in there. Now, once you've captured the information that you're looking for, in which case, if it's something like a view that's not correctly displaying information, you will take a SQL trace, and the SQL trace at that point allows you to capture the information at the time that you're invoking the view. It's fairly hard to read from within the SQL Profiler tool in SQL. So what you wind up having to do is, or what I found a way to actually just transform that data into a table and query the table in the database by first creating a database. In this example, I'm using a database called Profiler Data. I would then go and use that table and show it and give it into a path where I can then use the trace get table function and actually transform that information from the trace and dump it into a table. Once you have that information in the table, it's a whole lot easier to just use a SQL query to extract the information that you're looking for. And moving on to export SCOM effective monitoring configuration. This is something that I fairly started using in troubleshooting a lot. It is useful because it allows you to see what the configuration of an agent is. One of the biggest questions that I have from most customers is exactly what is running on my computer. There's also, because I work in the public sector, there's a lot of concern regarding security, and a lot of the things that are running on machines, for the most part, the customer wants to know exactly what's running on it. They want to avoid any security problems or anything of that nature. So they like to get a good understanding of what exactly my computer is doing. And in order to do that, you can use this particular PowerShell commandlet that allows you to see what's configured on that machine to run. Right? So either once you understand that better, then you can take a better approach to whether you need it or you don't need it, or whether it's meeting company policies, or whether something needs to be changed in the environment so that it is more secure, or things of that nature. Now, I did want to show you the configuration tool for that. And the reason for that is because I was very involved in a particular case that required us to improve on the use of that commandlet. And one of the things that commandlet allows you to do is to get every single thing that's running on that computer and it's monitoring on that computer. As you can more or less well guess, it's going to be quite a bit of data. And because it's quite a bit of data, sometimes you just don't have enough, you don't want to sit through the whole thing and just wait for it to happen. So, yeah, what's going on with this thing? Let me see if it's this one. Probably not this one. Hold on. So I work with a colleague of mine by the name of Tyson Paw on this particular tool. Let me see if I can find it. So here's the blog post that I work with Tyson on this. And essentially, one of the switches that the PowerShell commandlet uses is something called recurse contained objects, right? So it tells you whether you have a C drive and whether the C drive is being monitored for average disk space or free megabyte space or anything of that nature. And what's happening is that in some cases you won't get so much data that you won't get everything all in one shot. So you'll only get the very first thing returned to you, and you won't get the E drive. You won't get the F drive, for example, which I would think is pretty important if you wanted to know if your disks have enough free space. So in this case, what we came up with was a particular PowerShell script that what it does is it kind of goes through all of that, and it spits out just nothing but the results onto CSV files, and then merges those CSV files into a single one that's more useful. And the blog post is here. It just gives a couple of screenshots of what that actual script does and what the end result is. And in this case, this is just one that basically, as you can see, we have licenses, Ethernet, we have data access servers. I mean, everything that's being monitored on that agent. And as you can see, it's quite a bit of information in here. In this case, I guess there's more than 28 items, etc. And what this does is it grabs all this and it basically looks at every single object that's under that in such a way that you can see this. Current disk cube length, defrag analysis, free space. This is everything that's being monitored just for the C drive. So it can be pretty intensive. And this is the actual script that consolidates all of that and gives you a single output. It's pretty long, but I figured I'd just at least show you that piece. And going into one of my favorite subjects, and this is something that we get quite a few calls on, Event 31552 in the data warehouse. Now, as I mentioned before, we essentially have two databases. One is the operational database that allows you to pretty much allows the tool to work on a consistent basis, and then we have a long-term repository called the data warehouse for reporting and things of that nature. One of the symptoms that you're going to see when you start encountering this is obviously the actual event ID 31552 in the event log. However, that's going to happen every 10 minutes. Another symptom that you're going to see is that your reports are blank. And in some cases, these reports are very critical. In some cases, the CEO of a company wants to know exactly what his environment looks like, and he needs to make a decision on buying more RAM across 100 computers or more. So the reports are very, very critical to some of the folks who at a higher level have a lot more, some of the stakeholders that have invested interest in knowing some of these things. So when you pull up a report and you don't have one, it becomes a problem. And a couple of other things that you will see as a symptom of that is you have bad SQL performance, right? It's just console slow or something of that nature, or maybe your SQL DBAs have told you that these machines are consuming a lot of information, or they're just really slow. In order to troubleshoot these, you have to have a good understanding of how grooming works in the data warehouse. There's several components that go in that go into this. The first and foremost is the default retention settings. By default, most types of data that we insert in here are going to be retained for 400 days. There's other data types that are not going to be there for that long of a time. Some are 30 days, some of them are 90 days. But by the major data sets that we input into the actual data warehouse is 400 days. One of the other things that one of the actual things that drives this whole thing is a really small rule called standard data set maintenance, which is the rule that you see in the console, but is actually attached to a stored procedure. That stored procedure is actually has a cascade effect for a bunch of other storage procedures that are in the database that actually do all the work. It not only calls upon even more storage procedures to do lower level jobs, but it also partitions tables depending on the data sets that you're actually trying to aggregate. Obviously, there's data aggregation. So we don't necessarily grab the information and insert it into the data warehouse directly. We aggregate it over time, and that provides more useful reports over the course of time so that data retention and the data is more accurate. Eventually, grooming, you have to purge the information out of the database. Anything older than whatever's set in your data retention needs to be purged out. Now, because you start running into some of those issues, it's good to understand all of these things because you have to have a good understanding of all four of these components of how it works in order to be able to determine exactly where the issue may lay. Okay, and to show you further on that, actually this one, here we go. I'm just going to go really quickly through some of these. Not going to get into a whole lot of detail. We're kind of running out of time here for a second. But essentially, what is standard data set maintenance? It's just a set of stored procedures that allow you to groom out information as it comes into the database. There is certain cascade effect, like I was mentioning before, where we're actually calling upon even further more detailed stored procedures that allow us to actually troubleshoot that information, right? Insert the information and kind of roll with it. So a few things that may happen and why you see things are going wrong. SQL Standard is one of those, it's an addition that does not allow you to do offline defrag or anything like that. So you have to take the databases offline and then actually do some of those maintenance jobs. So some of those things are the ones that will get in the way of this working correctly. What that causes is it causes a backlog of information flow. So as the data is moving from the agents to the management servers to the back end, that flow is interrupted and you can get backed up, depending on how much data is being inserted as well. SQL performance is also a big factor in there. As I said, it depends on the version of SQL, but it also depends on the disks that you're using, how much memory it is, how much memory is allocated to the actual databases in the back end. And obviously data floods. And data floods are, and sometimes it can be an issue where somebody's made a change to a configuration setting, and that configuration setting has caused the system to actually do more work than it needs to, and then thus creating a flood, in which case you can run into this issue as well. Over the course of time, you might actually see some problems with large tables because the data types that are being inserted into those tables are not being properly groomed out for one reason or another. So that would be another cause for the issue. And SQL permissions as well. Plain and simple, sometimes people go in there and it's not necessarily intentional. It's just that there's a security requirement that needs to be met, and it's done because it's a security requirement. In most cases, it's something that needs to be done on the fly, and sometimes that can happen. So changing of SQL permissions will not allow the data to be written to the databases, so that would cause an issue as well. And from the laughter, I can tell that that's probably happened more than once. So in this case, what you'll probably see is something that looks like this in the event log. Is essentially just a message saying that something's happening. I have a timeout error, and I cannot complete the function that I was set out to do. And it'll give you the instance name of that. I'm sorry. I think we're out of time at this moment, so I'm thinking about just wrapping this up and not getting too deep into this. But if anybody has any questions, at this time, we can do a short Q&A. If not, you can approach me after the session's over. Okay. With that said, I'll go ahead and thank you for your time, and we'll go ahead and end the session right now.